Hello, I'm Tom Stevens. Welcome to the Tombot Fireside Chat series. Fireside Chats are educational interviews with experts from the fields of health, technology, and pets, along with interviews with families who share stories about their loved ones who suffer from health adversities. My guest today is Bob Peisner. Welcome, Bob.
Welcome to you, Tom. Nice to be here.
Bob, we met a few years ago at an Alzheimer's family support group meeting. Could you please share your family's connection with Alzheimer's?
Sure, Tom. It was in the early stages of my wife Eileen's journey on this awful disease. I had been there about a year or so before you showed up, and I remember that Jenny was a figment of your imagination at that point. We had no actual Jenny. You came in with a couple of toys and explained an idea that just registered so well with me, because my wife in her journey, just the dog played such a big part in her life. She never had a dog until we got married. Her parents would never allow it. And we were married in our late 20s. So it was many years, but she became so enamored with our dogs, and they were all beagles, one after the other after the other. And we had 3 of them. And she just was such a lover of animals that it was very helpful in her progression. So when you came into that meeting and came up with the idea of substituting Jenny for a live animal, I mean, it just registered so well with me, it was incredible.
What were some of the earliest indications that you had that Eileen was dealing with something more than just age-related?
I think I've explained to you before, I've heard of there's early onset Alzheimer's and late onset Alzheimer's, but she had sudden onset Alzheimer's. She was scheduled for a knee surgery in 2009 and a knee replacement. And while we were waiting to be called in for the surgery in the emergency room, in the waiting room, she finished the New York Times crossword puzzle. She was as sharp as a tack. She had the surgery, lasted about an hour and a half, came out of the surgery, went in to recovery, stayed there a while, got back to the room. And from that point forward, nothing was ever the same. There was, when she went to rehab, they said, you know, she's going to need a little bit of occupational therapy. She's not coming back quite as well and can't do like the little puzzles that we give her to test. So that was an indication that something was wrong. At first, the doctors had said they think it's, I forget the actual acronym, but there's an after surgery disease that could wait because of the anesthesia, could wait and last maybe as long as a year before you fully recover, post-anesthesia.
So the doctors were thinking this may have been related to the surgery as opposed to the beginnings of Alzheimer's.
Exactly, as I did too, because it just didn't make any sense. I had never heard of Alzheimer's coming on overnight. This was, so they thought that's what it might be. So they said, let it go for 5 or 6 months. But then she began to have a shuffle in her walk. Still was mentally pretty much okay. And then the doctor said, well, let's check something with a neurologist. We'll take, because she may have NPH. So we took her down to Cedars. They did a test. And in fact, they could see the fluid, the excess brain fluid in the MRI, and they said, we're going to drain this, she's going to be fine. And well, they were 50% correct, because when they drained the spinal fluid, she could have run a marathon. Her shuffle went away, she was perfect. But the memory still didn't get any help. It was still fading slowly, and it was the newer memories started to fade slowly. And that just continued to progress. Her walking never actually got worse again. but her memory never got any better again either.
I've had the pleasure of meeting most of your family. You've been blessed with a very large family. How did the discovery that Eileen was struggling with a serious illness affect the family?
Oh, it was horrible. I mean, just flat out terrible. She was always, you know, the stalwart. She was strong as a bull, even though she weighed 105 pounds soaking wet. She was strong as an ox, and none of us could believe it at the beginning. But it clearly became inevitable that this wasn't going to get any better, and that the disease was in fact Alzheimer's and was slowly progressing.
So Alzheimer's, as you say, is typically a progressive disease. As her condition progressed, as the Alzheimer's progressed, how did her mental and physical health needs change?
They changed pretty drastically. In the beginning, it wasn't a problem for me. It was fairly simple to take care of her. It was tough for her to get dressed in certain ways, a little help. She stopped cooking. Well, she stopped cooking when we got married, but she stopped cooking, and it was a little bit of help that she needed in the beginning. But then it was clear she was going to need more help, and we arranged to have her go to a daycare in Calabasas, and we found that to be good. They came and picked her up. They kept her active during the day, and they brought her home at night. And it wasn't a problem for me by myself to take care of her. For the first 2 or 3 years, I did it by myself, and she was pretty much fine, although she would begin to wander, which was in the initial phases, and we got a little concerned about her leaving the house, so we had to set special locks on the doors up higher than she could reach, so you could see the beginnings of that progression going on.
Going back to the beginning of this, was she driving? She was independent? One of the big challenges with my mother was the day I decided I had to take away her car keys. You know, my mom was out there playing bumper cars, and of course it was never her fault. Really, really tough day emotionally. How did you, where were you or where was she in that journey when you had to make some of these decisions for her?
It was interesting, Tom, because coincidentally, and I would say fortunately for me, she was on her way. She took a painting class every week, and she was on her way from her home to the painting class and stopped at an off-ramp, and there was an 18-wheeler alongside her. And when the light turned to make the right-hand turn off the ramp, that 18-wheeler made the turn and clipped her car and smashed the whole side. She was not injured, but after that, this was about the second year into the disease, and she was driving fairly well. She didn't want to drive anymore, so I didn't have to take her keys away. I would have, but she said, you know what, I don't want to drive anymore. So I took her to her, that was fine with me. I just drove her wherever she wanted to go.
You mentioned that she was going to a daycare. How often each week was she going to that?
In the beginning, a couple of times, and then by the end, and it was Silverado, I don't want to do a commercial, but in the end it was 5 days a week.
And how did you discover that was something that would be appropriate for her?
Basically research. And I was in the group at the time as well. And
that's the Alzheimer's support group?
The Alzheimer's support group, yes. And it was one of the things that was mentioned was daycare. Most people didn't know where any were, but I did some research and found Silverado, and then they had the transportation too, so it made it quite well. And they took the people out. It gave me time during the day to relax, get my work done.
Where along that did you realize that she was going to need assistance?
Really, from the daycare people, when they would bring her back, they would say, you know what, this isn't going to work. She needs more care than we can give. You know, we're staffed 1 to 10, and we just can't handle it. She's getting worse. So we tried to find a place to place her, and we did. In Woodland Hills, near where my son lives, there was a very nice memory care center that my son knew the owner of, and they were very friendly and nice. So we placed her there for about 2 months, a little less than 2 months. But she was miserable, just miserable. And I knew that they always are, and it takes some time, but it was not 2 weeks, it was close to 2 months. And she just wasn't doing well there. And so I brought her back home. And I figured I will place her, but I'll place her in another room instead of in another building, and have someone come in full time on a one-to-one basis and help, which was better care than she could get in any facility. And that's what I did beginning at that point in time.
The kinds of care that she and perhaps you were receiving through that, can you describe some of was it a medical care? Was it just basic day-to-day care needs?
It was, it was basic day-to-day care needs, help showering, help eating, help, so in the beginning, I mean, and then of course it just progressed and progressed and progressed to where it was, I actually had a live-in and a day worker coming in, because she was, towards the last 2 or 3 years, she was bedridden, and they had to turn her, change her, do everything for her.
Cognitive stimulation therapy is an area of research that's demonstrated a lot of good for, if not slowing the progression of the disease, at least enabling them to have more functionality. Prior to the onset of the disease, Eileen was a painter, and I've seen some of her amazing work. What kinds of things were you able to do to try to stimulate her and enrich her life during her journey with Alzheimer's?
Well, she was only painting for a very short while. It became very difficult, even in the early stages, for her to paint. But she loved music. Music was a big help. As I think, we have a lot of friends in the music industry, and we're very close to some of the performers, and the thing that helped a lot was playing their music. And she loved playing the music, and it calmed her down, more so in fact than medication did. It was really helpful. And staying with Tammy, with our dog, was immensely helpful. Tammy had incredible insight. She knew that Eileen was sick. She loved to be with me. We would go places, we would do things. But if I walked out of the room, she wouldn't. She would stay there with Eileen. She would jump up on the couch, and Eileen would just hold her and pet her, and it just calmed her down immensely. It was amazing.
For families who maybe are dealing with this early in the progression of Alzheimer's or another mental health adversity, what advice would you have for them to help them realize they're not alone, and how to seek out help?
Well, first thing is that Alzheimer's support group was just phenomenal.
And that's through the Alzheimer's Association?
That's correct, yep. The national one, the local one, there's regional, but the group that in fact my son found for me, because at that point in time when I first joined the group, my kids had said basically, look, we're losing Mom, we don't want to lose you too. We can see what's happening here. So you need to get some help. So they looked around and they found a support group here in Thousand Oaks, which is the one I went to. And that was an immense help, because there were people there who had gone through this entire journey. Their loved ones had passed away 10 years ago, and they were still going to the group, right down to people who just found out yesterday. So there was a huge area to gain from, and to help the others, and that was a strong benefit for me.
You were fortunate to be able to safely care for Eileen and her dog, Tammy, for the duration of Eileen's disease. How do you think products like Tombot's Jenny might be useful in those situations where a live animal companion isn't an option?
I can't imagine that it won't be just a tremendous help, not only for Alzheimer's, for many other types of diseases that where an association needs to be formed. It's going to bring so much joy to so many people who could use Sun. There's nothing I wouldn't do to help it get off the ground.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. My guest today has been Bob Peisner. On behalf of the entire Tombot team, thank you so much for viewing today. If you're interested in learning more, please visit our website, tombot.com, and learn how you can help us bring puppies to those people desperately in need. I'm Tom Stevens. Be well.